All right, so this is the briefing video for the 13th of February 2023 meeting. I am doing it in this room because it's interesting, but primarily because the roof leak has caused the water damage and Nate is repairing the walls in my office for one. The packet, I have just the packet, not a reference packet, because I have the budget included. I didn't want to separate that out. I wanted all the board members to have a printed version of that. So it's 151 pages, 43 pages of that are the budget, and then we have a few resolutions that eat up a lot of room as well, but I wanted to fully include those in the packet also. We have the planned normal start to the meeting, call to order, invocation, and pledge, roll call, approval of agenda, past meeting minutes, treasurer's report, paying the bills, fire department report, planning commission report, maintenance and grounds report. Don't expect anything unusual there. First public comment section, and then we get into our decision items. First one is a land bid opening. This is for a property on Russell. The board had set last month a minimum bid for $11,000. So I'll open bids on that. Next, we have Choice One bank accounts. This is to remove an employee that recently left from the Choice One bank accounts. They'd like to have meeting minutes on that to do that. Next, we have land sale policy corrections. These are a variety of just things that were wrong, typos and mistyped things, misrepresented things in the land sale policy and the application that Lexi has corrected, and so we'll make those corrections. Next, we have the annual meeting resolution, and this is written up for March 18th at 2 p.m. Technically, the board could verbally change that, but we discussed it before in the last meeting so that we wouldn't have to, so hopefully that's still good to go. So this resolution establishes that for March 18th. Next, we have the official salary resolutions. So there are 4 salary resolutions for supervisor, clerk, treasurer, and trustees. For these, I have, as prepared in the budget, I put in $45,000, which is an increase because it's at $43,000 something for the supervisor, clerk, and treasurer. Those have, when I came into office, those were kept at the same level. I see no particular need to change that. My initial plan was to not have raises for the elected officials for at least the first 2 years. That went slightly sideways. It was overruled in the first year, and then people went with me in the second year, and then they have raises going out. I have had the trustees written up at $5,000, which they were at because they were raised from $3,000 to $5,000 in that first year. And the pay for elected officials is very interesting. I think that Franklin in the constitutional conventions, I think he might have been right in that it might be a good idea to have elected positions not paid at all, but it would significantly change things. I think it would significantly change the structure and then the history of politics in the United States. And he wasn't sure that was a good idea, and I'm also the same. What having the salaries does, and what we're really shooting for on the salaries, is that it doesn't exclude someone who's poor. Definition, they need a paycheck. It doesn't exclude someone from taking on one of those roles. So that's the idea. My plan is to propose raising them this year, and then for the supervisor, clerk, and treasurer, again, raising them next year. We'll see how that goes. That could change at any point in their politics. Next, we have the cemetery rates resolution. This is because the fees for us are being raised, and so it makes sense for us to raise our fees as well. Next, we have board review members. This became a weirdly political thing. Not fully sure why. I don't particularly care. Now we have 5 people for 2 positions. So I just need 1 full member, 1 alternate member. I'll let whoever wants to do that make motions on that. Next, we have water policy board member. Nola at the last meeting in the water policy board vote and mentioned that I have a conflict of interest with being on the water policy board and the board of trustees. I'm not sure how that would be a conflict of interest. The idea is that I represent the township on that board, but if she wants to be on that board, then I'm completely fine with that. I think I've largely worked out the issues. It's in a decent direction now. It could obviously be flopped, but it's in a real decent direction now. And the different boards and things, I'm not trying to join extra boards. That's why we recruited Kevin, who worked out great, to be on the library board. And I'm on the wastewater management committee, I'm on the water policy board, I'm on the Berry Junction Trail Commission, but to the extent that someone else wants to be on those, I am fine with that. Next, we have the Central Road hearing and resolution number 2. So we did resolution number 1 last month, and this, we have one written objection for it. We've had a number of people call, inquire on things like that. So this, this packet is fully available. It's on the Municode system. So if people want to see that, hopefully they're able to. They can see all of the information that the board has. It's a lot. I put the full resolutions in here. I put the letter that I get from the lawyer. There's a lot of stuff. It's in there. You can look at it if you want yourself. That's the idea of it. So if we have one written objection on that, we'll see how the hearing goes. And if people speak out against it or for it, I'm sure there'll be some, just like, Mark, the guy that was doing the petition for this, when he was doing it, he was really enthusiastic about it. I'm like, it's going to be a political, nightmare to a certain extent, because it always is, which is a huge hassle for me. So it's very annoying, but I don't want to hold up people making improvements to their roads. And he didn't think it was at first, and now as is getting into it, I think you'll agree with me at some point here. Next, we have the Central Road resolution number 3. So they do different things. You have a total of 4 resolutions for a special assessment to happen, to go through. And there's 2 hearings, right? So the first resolution, for the most part, is a way oversimplification, but nevertheless, the first resolution last month establishes this hearing, right? Resolution number 2 is that hearing. Resolution number 3 establishes the next hearing, which would be next month, the second hearing, the 4th resolution. If that passes, then that's the way things are. It's just set. And so it moves forward from there without being changed. And so if both those pass, then we'll move forward with that. If one of them drops, then the project is done. Next, we have a FOIA appeal hearing. And this is Kevin McCabe, our continual McCabean problem. The most recent ramp up of activity, it's just trolling of the township. It's an impressive amount of trolling. So I applaud the trolling of the government, even though I happen to be the government, which is very annoying. He's put in like 8 FOIA requests. He's essentially trying to get people in trouble. So he's trying to go around the township and report them for building things or zoning things, whatever it may be. He's just trying to harass people. And to do that in a way that harasses me, so that I would help him get a tax exemption. And since I'm not writing off as a tax exemption, he tries to play on the border of some tax fraud stuff, but he can appeal that to the tax tribunal and put his stuff in with him, his paperwork, and go about it the way everyone else does. Or he can go around harassing people like this and harassing me in an attempt to coerce me into signing off on something like that. It's a very odd strategy for me personally. I'm not sure how many people that would work on. It'd probably work on a decent number of people. Obviously not going to work on it with me. But this is one of those things. So, and I told Tracy, Tracy's the FOIA coordinator, she's the clerk, and that's pretty normal. And whenever Kevin McCabe is interacting with you, he's trying to get you, right? He's trying to mess you up, get you in trouble in some way, 100% of the time as a human being, as far as I can tell. And so she got in another one of his FOIA requests, and she had said, all right, I'll get the response to you on this day. It's like 10 days later. And then, but that was a crazy day for us. We had multiple things happen, and she missed it. So the next day, he filed an appeal, sent it to me. I wasn't sure what to do with a FOIA appeal. I haven't had one before, so I consulted with the lawyer. It comes to the board for a hearing. This one's kind of odd because it's for an occupancy permit for an addition that a number of years ago the permits were pulled for. They were never finalized. Even if they were finalized, we don't issue an occupancy permit for that. So he's trying to FOIA request something that doesn't exist, which technically means, since you can't give it to them, it's a denial. And so that's essentially what's coming to the board. McCabe will keep being a pain, as he's been in the municipalities along Western Michigan for the last couple of decades. Next, we have the General Code Enforcement Ordinance. This actually involves McCabe too, because he influenced this. One of my favorite phrases is "be prepared to appreciate what you meet," and it it's a very open statement because it doesn't say be prepared to appreciate the good things that you meet, right? It's be prepared to appreciate what you meet. Anything that you meet, it includes the bad things. And so in this case, with McCabe going around, he has proposed, he wrote a letter that he sent to the village and he forwarded it to multiple people in the township as well, proposing to put together a group of people to go around and report people, right? Which is, I mean, it seems very Eastern German, like kind of that a totalitarian state like the Soviets or something to that extent. Seems very un-American, but nevertheless, he's proposing that. And so that is a great reminder that there's a danger in enforcement, right? And so I want to have a set procedure so we're not ramping up the speed for one person and then not extending the time frame forever for another person and whatnot, but there has to be some give and take. There has to be some judgment on that type of thing. And so I don't want to lock in a process where someone like McCabe can attempt to work the system specifically to harass people, right? In the township organization itself or just the citizenry, so that he can try to bully people, right? He could use it for a neighbor, and this is used a lot, right? It's not like holding this position doesn't tend me towards seeing humans in a good light, right? It certainly doesn't do that. And so do this thing or I'll report you for whatever, right? That type of thing. McCabe is a perfect example of that mentality, right? It reminds me a bit of the Eichmann trials, which came out, Hannah Arendt, one of the greatest political philosophers of last century, came out with the phrase of the banality of evil. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, a lot of insight in that. And that led to the milligram experiments and stuff, and none of those came out positive for humanity. And for that reason, I added one item on harassment that wasn't in there before. I added a couple of things about severability and things like that to change it more into an ordinance format rather than the resolutions we've been working off of. But largely, we've worked out the kinks in that type of thing. And I explain that a little bit in this packet as well. I expect that to go through now. It's for the general code, right? So there's 2 ordinance books, 2 law books that the township has. One is the general code, and that just comes straight before the board. The other one is the zoning ordinance. And so that is going through the process right now, because we have the resolutions in place, but that is going through the process to become an ordinance through the planning commission, and it will come back to the board. That is a separate one. Next, we have our discussion items. First is budget work session date. With having the annual meeting, with the budget meeting to follow that, because the annual meeting is specifically made for people to be able to show up and vote, the electors, anyone that's an elector in the township, and overrule the township board from giving themselves a raise, right? So if you don't like the fact that I have written up the supervisor, clerk, and treasurer to go from 43 something per year to 45, then you can come, you can vote in that meeting, and you can basically just keep the salaries where they're at, right? And I think that's a good thing to keep in place. Most municipalities don't have an annual meeting of the electors anymore, but I like it. I think it's a good thing to keep in place. But it's not a vote on the overall budget. The board still votes on that, but we can have that right after the annual meeting of the electors. That's been the tradition in the township, and I see no particular reason to change that. But with being on the 18th, we're going to have a discussion in this meeting on Monday about the budget. And I think it's reasonable to have another one in the March meeting, but it's too close to really make changes before the 18th meeting. And so I would like to have another just budget work session somewhere near the end of February, beginning of March here, in case we want to make any other changes. And well, I'll get to how the budget's written up in here in a bit. Next, we have the fire millage. So this is very important. I think more important than most people realize. The last 2 years, I've gone to the Reese Buffer 8th graders and spoken to all of the 8th graders, right? It takes all day. They bring in the classes and whatnot, and we go over local municipal issues, right? How they work, how the voting works. The kids can ask me any questions. It works out well because in the 8th grade, they are studying the federal level, and then that is somewhat similar to the state level, but it's quite different at the county, township, village, city level. That local municipality structure is different, and it's the level you can actually make a difference at. right? On the federal level, you can watch the news. Yay, you don't make a difference. On the local level, you make a difference. So, it seems like education might be best to reverse that somewhat. That's a whole different issue. And there's not a ton of interest. Last year, I specifically asked all the classes who had been interested at some point in possibly becoming a firefighter. There were a few kids out of hundreds, and the 13-year-olds at Reese Buffer, out of hundreds of kids, there were probably 4 that had thought about it at some point, right? So there's low interest in that, low interest moving forward as far as the generations are concerned. Much more interest in becoming a professional video game player or something to that extent. While we keep slowly, right, we keep slowly increasing calls. And then I think a lot of people are aware that the ambulance service isn't necessarily great and the future of that isn't necessarily looking great. And so we could easily make all of our calls by just dropping like medical calls and stuff like that. But I think that would be a huge disservice to the township, to the residents, like a huge disservice, especially because ambulances are showing up slower. And so that leaves us in quite a pinch. And our guys are doing great, right? Our fire department shows up, they do well, right? They do very well, especially in comparison to the area. And so to continue that, I think it's reasonable to look at adding full-time firefighters at this point. That brings us into a significant financial issue. And so I think a lot of the hesitancy in the past about passing millages or something like that in the township has been trust with the finances. And that is extremely reasonable, right? When I came in, there was a couple $1 million gap in payments looking forward for the bond on the sewer project along Whitehall Road that was done in 2006. And that's a significant issue. There are 2 major court cases that went to the Court of Appeals. The township did not win. And the rates weren't adjusted. That account was essentially just floated. It was going to go to zero, right? It was going to go completely broke in 2026. We have a bond out through 2035. And so if you have significant financial issues like that, it's reasonable to say, no, we're not going to give more money to that government. Right? And there are just failed governments. We all know of one in the center of Muskegon that does horrible all the time, right? It's in a failing state. It's a failed government. And so I think that is extremely reasonable. Now, with having sold the property, put that $500,000 into the sewer fund, sent out letters that I was raising rates on the sewer fund to all the sewer customers, and surprisingly didn't get too much pushback on that because a lot of people realized there were these previous issues that needed to be sorted out, or there's going to be serious issues, bigger issues in the future. And so that has gone decently well and put us on a more stable footing. And I think revealing all of the information, I know it's made a lot of people, staff, administration, and other politicians and surrounding municipalities and stuff, uncomfortable with me revealing so much information, putting it out, just immense amounts of information that anyone can look at. But I think it's important to restore that trust. And so I think it's reasonable. I'm not going to go for like a road millage and stuff like that. I'm not going to just stack up millages. I think that's ridiculous. At a certain point, and I'm kind of in that position with the education stuff around here, I just vote no. So I understand that perspective. I'm like, whatever money you have, just use that in a better way. You should have enough. For fire, we don't have enough money to add full-time firefighters. The numbers won't work out. And so we'll need to renew the operating millage soon anyways. And there's a mess of laws. The tax laws are a ridiculous mess across the entire United States. That includes Michigan, that includes here. And they're set up on like a percentage basis with the mills. But there's specifically a law, the Headley Amendment, that tries to take down the percentage over time, which means as the population grows, as more houses and businesses and places go in and more stuff you have to take care of, if you're running off a percentage basis, your money would go up as you had more stuff to do. But there's specifically a law in place that reduces that percentage. Now, you can make the case that this makes all of the local municipalities much more dependent on the centralized state financing since so much comes through them. 53% of our budget comes through state revenue sharing, right? It makes it difficult to say that the larger government than you is wrong on things. And I could go into much more discussion on that, but I won't. And so I don't like that structure. Nevertheless, that is the way the structure works. And so we have this percentage that should increase in proportion to our development. Instead, it does the exact opposite. The percentage goes down. This is stupid. It's a really dumb law. But nevertheless, it is the way it is set up. And so we have to deal with that. And you have to do a renewal every so often, however long you pass the millage for initially. And so the renewal for fire operating, for having firefighters, stuff like that, because we have a separate millage for the equipment itself. So fire operating, to have a fire department at all, that is coming up soon, a couple of years. I'm bringing that now because I want to do the increase as well. And I don't want to do a vote every few years on fire stuff. I think that's ridiculous. I would end up falling in the same category of just saying at some point, why am I voting on this every 2 years? I'm going to start just voting no. And so I want people to understand what we're going for here. There will be two things. This is for discussion. Next month, the board, if the discussion goes well, the way I assume it's going to go, we will pass a resolution to put it on the ballot. And then in the August vote, on the August ballot, people will be able to go and vote. You'll see two items for fire millage. We have to do it that way because we're asking for an increase. So the one is a renewal, right? And so it's to continue the fire operating as it is, right? Which was with a full-time chief and paid on-call firefighters, right? That do duty shifts, but we don't have any full-time firefighters other than the chief. And so there's another vote for an increase. Now, the way I've written it up in here is for 0.85 mils. And so it's not very much. I figured if we go with 1 mil, you're starting to hit that trigger where people are like, I don't know if I want to increase my taxes by 1 mil, even though it doesn't come out to very much money for a person, for an individual house at those low numbers, But nevertheless, this only adds a few $100,000 per year for the township. It's not like there's a multi-million-dollar facility going in, something like that, where a bond's being pulled and then it's multiple mills, right? It's just 0.85 mils the way it's written up now. That's a little less than I would prefer to increase it, to try to add full time, because it's going to make the budget, decently tight, difficult to work out. But I think it's a very reasonable ask. And so for voting public, for me thinking about a citizen going in and voting now. And so that is what this discussion is over. If it goes well, then resolution next month, and then vote in August. All right, that's the plan. And I'll plan on the township sending out a mailer to the people in the township as well. The township, as far as that mailer is concerned legally, we can't be for it or against it. We just have to present that this is going to be on the ballot, that type of thing. If people want to put together, and I will put money towards this too, I can coordinate it if people want, or someone else could coordinate it. I'll probably try to do it on a decently low budget if I coordinate it. I'll probably throw $500 into it myself. That won't be enough. So I would need other people to do it. But I personally, right, as Jeff, I can send out mailers saying I'm in favor of the millage. But as supervisor, I can't have the township send out mailings being in favor of it, only informing people, right? So there's a decent difference there. Next, we have the water ordinance. And so obviously we've been having big debates on this for quite a while. I'm not sure exactly how long. I've probably been bringing it to the board somewhere between 6 months and a year. And it split the board multiple times in odd ways, odd votes. All right. And so I've been working on it with having passed the ordinance that the Water Policy Board, the rest of the municipalities had agreed to and passed. I think we're on solid footing to now move forward. I had given the way Kerry had made his motion, I sent that to the lawyer. I said, I think it gets so much into cutting the finances that the Water Policy Board would probably have grounds to sue and try to get money from the township to make up the difference. I had adjusted a few things and sent that to the lawyer as well. The lawyer disagreed with both of those approaches, which I thought was interesting. Obviously, the reason I had the things the way I did is because I thought they were decent. But he disagreed with both of those approaches. His approach is more based on a defense in court based on due process. And so it largely just means if there's new construction within 200 feet of the water line, of the property line, a building within 200 feet, then you have to connect and you have to stay connected, but you can still operate a well as well. So that's part of the previous negotiations that already had with the Water Policy Board and got it in there. And so not for in that household, outside, right? And so that's it's a somewhat different approach. Good, I think it's pretty solid. So whoever's on the Water Policy Board, they'll have to take that to the Water Policy Board and discuss it. I mean, it can be flat. Like it can go bad at this point, but I think largely I've laid a solid foundation, and I think it's pretty set up. Like I think it can be taken care of decently well as long as it's not fumbled at this point, and basically present it to them and say, hey, maybe everyone could look at doing this. I don't think that will happen. Maybe part of us, some of the municipalities do it, and if not, maybe just Dalton Township does it singularly. And I think we're on solid footing for moving forward with that. That the person that goes to the Water Policy Board can report back to the board on that type of thing. So that's the discussion on that. Next, we have the Spark Beagle Park project. And this is the grant that was proposed and approved for moving forward. Christy is leading that. She's doing really well. She has been able to collect a bunch of letters of support, and we'll plan on having the next resolution that we have to pass for moving forward with that project next month, and then seeing if the grant comes through after that. Next, we have the Township Hall roof. The board they balked a little bit at the quotes I had gotten for replacing the roof. So I eventually got a quote for a decent repair, like an extensive repair. And I was really hoping and thinking that would work for a few years at least. It hasn't gone very well. Like the repairs are done, but we had a leak to the internal wall. That's why I'm here. That's why my stuff is in here at different points. That's the building inspectors, but some other stuff is mine, and I'm working on Steve's office. Nate is redoing the drywall. We had Surf Pro in to clean it up and dry it out, and parts of the drywall cut out. Nate is finishing that up and getting it back in shape so that the building inspector and the assessor's office and my office will be back up and usable. But it has gone great. When those guys started to cut into it, there was a bunch of rotten wood along the back there. There's the old, original 1970s gravel roof on the top of this. I think of gravel on roads, not gravel on roofs. And there were just a bunch of layers of roof sealed over top of that. And so you could even have a leak through the top layers of roof that would hit one of the lower layers of roof, run somewhere else, and then a leak through there, which makes it basically impossible to determine where a leak exactly is coming through on this roof. And so those guys from Bob Roofing replaced a bunch of stuff. They replaced more than they quoted, and they spent a bunch of time on here, but it still hasn't worked out great. And so it makes sense, I think, to now look at actually replacing the roof and consider the repairs sunk cost, right? It's lost cost. And we'll work on that. Obviously, all the quotes I collected before will be expired, but the way construction's been over the last several years, they don't make long quotes anyway. So with having a board meeting once a month, just the way that works, the quotes don't work out great for stabilizing anyway. I want to have a discussion item on it. I don't want to do it in winter anyway. It's been a weird winter, but when it's really wet and there's snow and stuff, you really just shouldn't be doing a roof. I know other people have opinions on that, but it's a bad plan because things won't laminate together properly and things like that. And so I've included that in part of the budget, which I could do a few hours on budget discussion by monologuing by myself. I won't do that, right? If you want to see all the budget stuff, it's in here. I'll get to that next. But for the Township Hall roof, I think that's probably decent to include as a flat roof. It's more to peak it, and several places weren't interested in peaking it. Do the flat roof. We got the 4 AC units that I had repaired. There were literally, when I came into office, there was one with cut wires with the fan and everything still running. And then there was literally exposed wire running between the units on the roof. So we had that stuff put together. One of the 4 was not able to get back up to working. So last year I just left Steve, the zoning administrator. I left his office without AC. So he just, he had to sweat it out. And the newest one up there is from 1994. And so really all of those, the one that was broken, I couldn't get parts for it. And so we'll have to replace those, and probably makes sense to look at taking them off the roof. I'll have a meeting next week on Monday, actually, to look at what those numbers might look like. I can probably, my initial intuition of going with Jay Stevens for the roof, I think it's still probably correct. And so we'll see how that goes. I do have a meeting later this week, meeting up with a guy for what it would take to replace this building. But I don't see how that would be financially possible. And we don't have a good spot for it to go, things like that. So maybe just as we're replacing the roof, get new AC units, put those on the ground. That hopefully will make the roof last longer. That's my initial impression. I'm not necessarily a construction guy. Maybe redo some of the inside stuff and keep operating out of the 1970s building that is running out of room. But I'm comfortable with that moving forward. So we'll see how that goes. Next, we have the budget. So obviously I've included the budget in here. What I've done on this budget, just like I started doing with the quarterly adjustments, is I have written a reason for everything. Not that my reasons necessarily explain everything, so some of them are just short, some of them are they are what they are, and they're kind of miscellaneous funds and operations, whatever it may be. So some of the explanations are longer, some are shorter, some are more detailed, some are less detailed, but for every line item, I included a line of reasoning, at least somewhat behind it. So the idea of this is to make the document at least somewhat self-explanatory, and so someone can look through it and know what they're looking at. And what I've done here is included the documents, the numbers and things that I was working off of to a decent extent. So there's a lot of info in these 43 pages if anyone really wants to dive into the budget. There's one thing on just the changes, the short list for fire. There's one letter about the sports and short staff program that's been traditionally done in Dalton. And then a road list, projected things over the next 3 years. But the costs on those projected items are costs today for materials and work and stuff like that. So they won't be accurate over the next 2 years because I would expect the cost to increase. But nevertheless, and it's like when we get into the ARPA funds and stuff, that's to be handled in an odd way. Those two items are TBD, right? To be determined. Because when we use it, we bring it in, we count it as revenue, and we count it as an expense, so it zeroes itself out. My plan would be to spend a decent amount on getting the building in shape, not leaking, things like that, and then throw the rest at roads, right? That'd be my proposal. We'll see what the board thinks of that type of thing. And so I have those included as their own items under building and under roads. And so those will just adjust for those ARPA funds when it happens. But what you're seeing here, if you look at it, is I have one column. There's a column with all of the numbers for the departments, a column with the description, a column with my proposed budget. So these are the numbers that I put in. That's what I'm proposing the township approve. Those are the things we'll be talking about and changing, right? Adjusting wherever we think would make sense. Next, I have the amended budget that we have so far for this year, including the amendments that have been made. Next, I have a column that's activity so far through this year. Obviously, certain things haven't happened yet this year. That's why you can see some of the odd numbers for property taxes in there yet and things like that. And so the next one is activity for last year. So that's all of the activity that happened for that year. So those are really solid numbers for a full year of activity for each one of these items. And then I have that full activity for the year before that as well. So the full time I've been in office, you can actually see all of the financial activity in these one document, in these 43 pages, along with reasonings for everything that I'm proposing. So that took a decent amount of work, but I think that's really nice. If I was a trustee or even a citizen that was highly interested in it for some reason, that's the type of thing I would like and appreciate. So that's why I made it. That is the board meeting. It's quite a lot. The packet is large and somewhat cumbersome in itself. I expect the meeting to be pretty large and cumbersome because we have multiple hearings. We have the entire budget that, who knows, it could be a short discussion. It could be a very long discussion on that type of thing. Hard to say, right? Several controversial things, several things that could be really political. And the way I gauge it is just, I expect in every meeting several things, right? So they try to do a lot, right? The whole idea when we take an office is fix as many things as I can in 4 years, right? And then move on with my life onto other things, right? And so I try to get a lot done, make things happen. And so I expect several things to be controversial. I expect a number of things not be controversial, and I expect to be wrong on several of those things, and that some of the non-controversial things will be controversial and some of the controversial things will not be controversial. And so far, I think I've been right in every meeting over the last over 2 years now. So that's what I expect out of the meeting. If anyone has any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out. I'm still going through all my voicemails and emails every day, even though that computer's not working. I have another computer set up. So supervisor@daltontownship.org, or my direct line at the office is area code 231-332-6700. You can stop in. I keep crazy hours, so because I really don't pay attention to the office hours. I might not be here during some of the office hours. I'm going soon. I'm going because I help out with a homeschool group, and that's a discussion group with teenagers over philosophy. So super interesting. I've been doing that on Thursdays for a little while. And then, a lot of times I'm here in the middle of the night. I think I got home at 2 a.m. yesterday. I came here the night before. I was here until like midnight. And I came here yesterday, I think about 12 hours straight, went home for a couple hours, and then came back because I had finished up some things on the packet, and then got home at like 2 a.m. So it ends up being all over the place. You can stop in. If anyone wants to set up a meeting, obviously feel free to reach out. Email, call, and we can just set up a meeting as well. Otherwise, this is Jeff Martin signing off. Until next time, I'm sure I'll see quite a number of people at the meeting because I expect several big things to be happening, several controversial things, which if you want people to show up to meetings, you have to have controversial things happening at the meetings. So that's kind of nice for interaction.